113 points, a fourth straight win, and Caitlin Clark hands out 14 dimes. The box score finally caught up to the buzz. If you're just joining the Indiana Fever Daily podcast, Indiana came into tonight stacking wins. Overtime over Chicago, a road win at Connecticut, but it had been messy. Big leads kept leaking away, and the late-game control never quite matched the shot-making. Stephanie White's group still needed to show the ceiling could come with steadier possessions, not just enough talent to survive the wobble.
And tonight, no wobble. We've got Clark's first real post-return stat line, plus the supporting cast going nuclear. Stick around, we're breaking all of it down.
Let's start with the final margin. 113-91 over Toronto. 22 points, and for the first time on this run, the double-digit lead didn't evaporate.
I keep waiting for the fourth quarter to break my heart, and it just didn't. Felt weird. Good weird.
Mitchell and Cunningham combined for 51. That's the supporting cast carrying the scoring with a number attached, not just a thing we're hoping is true.
51 between two of them. Cunningham's not just the closer by default anymore. She's putting up volume. That reframes the whole depth conversation.
Which answers a question we kept circling. Who White trusts in the last 4 minutes with fewer bodies? Tonight, the distribution gave us something real. Against this opponent, at least.
You had to say it. Against this opponent.
Because it matters. Toronto drops to 7-8, a game below 500. Beating teams in your standings neighborhood is different than beating teams you should beat. On the step back, Clark played, posted a double-double, dished 14, and Indiana won by 22 without making her grind through 40 hard minutes. So now the back management conversation moves to the next step.
Right. It's not how do we even tell anymore. We watched it. 14 assists in a game they never had to drag to the wire.
And that's the cleaner read. Was White managing the risk, or did a comfortable game manage it for her? The usage and the assignments tonight give us something to argue from.
When the lead's that big, you get the luxury of low minutes. The test is whether that holds in a one-possession game.
Exactly. Tonight gives us a better data point and changes the terms a little. I'm not calling it a verdict, but after the lead-leaking streak, I'll take the first clean counter-evidence we've had all week. Here's TSN.
Caitlin Clark finished with a double-double, while Kelsey Mitchell and Sophie Cunningham combined for 51 points as they powered the Fever past the tempo. With the loss, Toronto drops a game below 500 with a 7-8 record.
Fever 113, Toronto 91, and here's the line that matters. Mitchell and Cunningham combined for 51. First time all week the supporting cast carried the scoring weight with numbers behind it instead of vibes.
Mitchell went 9 of 11. That's a clinic. And Sophie's not the closer by default anymore. She's putting up real volume.
And for the contender test, that's a new data point. Indiana didn't just hold the lead, they blew Toronto out for win 4. No white-knuckle finish for once.
A 22-point margin. Do you know how good that felt? Clark with a 21 and 14 double-double, back into the assists lead, and she didn't have to grind 40 minutes to get it.
Context, though. Toronto drops to 7-8, a game under 500, and they were depleted. Good win, real win, but let's be honest about the opponent.
Caitlin Clark is back. The Fever are winning, and everyone's excited. But her back has been an issue since literally Game 1. How do we actually tell whether Stephanie White is managing this thing properly or just riding the wave?
It's a fair thing to watch closely because the paper trail's a little messy. Clark herself said back in the season opener that her back gets out of line pretty quickly, her words, and she was already making mid-game trips to the locker room, per SI's coverage. Then Indiana scratched her less than 2 hours before tip against Portland, without her ever appearing on the injury report beforehand. That triggered a formal WNBA warning for the Fever, per Sporting News and USA Today. White pushed back hard. My reaction is, for what? But the league's point was real. The process broke down. The cleaner signal now is what White confirmed to reporters this week. Clark will be listed as probable on the injury report for the foreseeable future as she navigates this. That's the thing to track. If she starts disappearing from the report and then reappearing as a late scratch, that's a red flag. If she's consistently probable but playing with monitored minutes, that looks more like an actual management plan. And per The Athletic's Annie Costabile, the Clark-White dynamic is under the microscope too. How White handles the tension between Clark's competitiveness and the staff's responsibility is genuinely part of the job right now.
You mentioned Clark's defensive assignments as a potential stress point. Is there a structural reason the defense itself might be making her back situation worse?
Potentially, yeah. Sporting News flagged that the Fever scheme has them switching on screens, and that routinely puts Clark in isolation against bigger, stronger players. Exactly the kind of physical, reactive, lateral work you'd want to limit for someone managing a back issue. So watch whether White starts hiding Clark defensively, or trims some of those switching reps as a load management tool, even if the minutes stay up. That would be the subtler sign the staff is being thoughtful, instead of just hoping adrenaline gets them through.
If you like staying close to the Fever every day, check out Angel City Daily Podcast, a daily ACFC supporter briefing with match reaction, NWSL standings, roster moves, women's soccer in Los Angeles, and supporter buzz. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts. Next up, Indiana hosts Atlanta on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. If you want to dig deeper, we've put links to every story from today's episode in the show notes, so you can follow up on the ones that caught your ear. That's Indiana Fever Daily Podcast for today. This is a Lantern Podcast.